Why he picking on Boosie? Because I fight to get Marlo Mike out. He'll die in there. He went to go tell because he couldn't sleep at night. Boosie sleep good at night because he didn't pay the trip. Baby had 9 bodies. 15 years old. He paid $2,000 per hit. And people saying God on his side. You're a damn lie when he got a 15-year-old doing life in prison. And by the way, I helped work on that law to try to get this kid out. It's called JLY. I went to Washington, D.C. over 4 or 5 times. We got him abolished, but you know what? They didn't make it retroactive for the boy Boosie used. So that's why this is personal to me.
One of my other partners had got murdered. And Marlo Mike was on the scene. And the police was like, they couldn't take it no more because they didn't know if this young guy was that advanced to where like he was murdering shit while they was watching him, you know? So they went on and picked him up. But when they picked him up, they told him, my partner Tyree Gangsta Reese, rest in peace, when he got killed, they picked Marlo up that same night. Just because that's where Marlo family was located at. And that's the people he was calling and he was talking to. So just so happened, he came over there and my partner got killed. So they went on and picked him up.
When you had a 15-year-old hitman, nigga, that murdered black people. Who next, Boosie? That little nigga had that tattooed on his chest. He killed so many black people for Boosie. Boosie Boo. The little kid got life without parole at 16 years old, my nigga. Juvenile life, a law that I fight to have abolished. A law that I fight personally, nigga, and work on with children in Angola. And Lil Boosie had a paid, hired hitman little boy that killed nobody but black people. Lil Marlo Mike in the back itching for a body is what he said.
A 15-year-old boy, 9 deaths, and a story that stayed hidden for years. Think about that for a moment. Before he was old enough to drive, before he could vote, and before he even finished school, this teenager was linked to a series of killings in Baton Rouge. What makes it even more shocking is that he was not a hardened criminal or a powerful gang leader. He was just a kid still growing up, trying to survive in a world meant for adults. The case becomes even more complicated when you look at what happened afterward. While the teenager ended up facing life in prison, a rising rap artist connected to the same circle went to trial and was later released. One person lost his freedom forever, while the other returned to the spotlight, making music, hosting events, and building a career. This contrast left many people confused and asking questions. How did a child become part of such a serious case? Was he acting alone? Or was someone else guiding him? And why is this story coming back into the public eye after so many years? This situation is not only about crime. It is about influence, power, and how young minds can be shaped by the environment around them. It also raises concerns about a justice system that treated a teenager like a fully grown adult. Now, reports suggest that the same young man who once stayed silent may be ready to speak again. If that happens, it could change everything people thought they knew. To understand how this happened, you have to look at Baton Rouge during the mid-2000s. The city was already dealing with tension, crime, and neighborhood conflicts. After Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, thousands of people moved into the area, increasing pressure on housing, jobs, and communities. With more people came more disputes and violence began to rise. At that time, the city's crime rate was among the highest for places its size. During this period, rap music became a powerful voice for the streets. One of the most influential artists from Baton Rouge was Lil Boosie, later known as Boosie Badass. His music reflected real life in the city, raw, direct, and honest. Songs like Zoom and Wipe Me Down became popular, not just because of the sound, but because they told stories people could relate to. However, when music starts reflecting real street issues, it often becomes connected to them as well. As the rapper's fame grew, attention and pressure also increased. Success can bring admiration, but it can also create jealousy and enemies. Old conflicts do not always disappear when someone becomes famous. Sometimes they become even bigger. In environments like this, protection goes beyond security at concerts. It becomes personal, tied to loyalty and street connections. At the same time, somewhere in the same city, A teenager was watching all of this unfold. His name was Michael Louding, but people knew him as Marlo Mike. He was only 15 years old. Most kids his age are worried about school, friends, or maybe a small part-time job. Their minds are still developing. Scientists say the part of the brain responsible for decision-making and self-control does not fully mature until the mid-20s. This means teenagers often act on emotion without fully understanding long-term consequences. But in certain neighborhoods, childhood ends early. Growing up in Baton Rouge during that time meant being surrounded by street conflicts, violence, and powerful figures who seemed respected and untouchable. For a young person, attention from someone with fame or status can feel like approval. It can give a sense of purpose and belonging. According to prosecutors, Marlo Mike became closely connected to people in that circle. Court records later claimed he was involved in several shootings between 2009 and 2010. Investigators said he was paid around $2,000 for each job. To an adult, that amount might seem small. But to a teenager from a struggling background, it could feel like a lot of money and a way to gain respect. Authorities eventually connected him to 9 killings before he even turned 16. The incidents were described as targeted attacks, not random acts. Investigators believe there was a pattern. Identify the person, wait for the right moment, carry out the act, and leave quickly. The structured nature of these claims shocked many people. When most people think of someone involved in multiple murders, they imagine an experienced adult, not a teenager who legally still belonged in a classroom. One of the most talked about cases involved the death of Terry Boyd in October 2009. As the investigation grew, arrests were made and headlines spread across the country. Prosecutors presented the image of a young person acting as an enforcer within a larger conflict. Still, many people question whether he was acting on his own or being influenced by older individuals who understood how to stay protected. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of being arrested during a raid, the teenager walked into a police station on his own. According to reports, he gave a confession linking himself to several of the killings. This decision shocked both the community and investigators. In environments where silence is considered survival, speaking up is rare. There are different ideas about why he confessed. Some believe the pressure became too heavy. Others think fear, guilt, or the hope of a lighter sentence played a role. Whatever the reason, once he spoke, the case changed quickly. Investigators began building timelines, reviewing phone records, and connecting names. When the confession became public, the city reacted strongly. Some people accused him of breaking street loyalty, while others saw him as a child who had become trapped in something far bigger than he could handle. At the end of the day, he was still a teenager facing the reality of life in prison. The case left Baton Rouge divided and raised difficult questions about responsibility, influence, and how society handles young people who grow up surrounded by violence. Even years later, the story continues to resurface, reminding people how quickly a young life can change when the environment, pressure, and choices collide. After the indictments were announced, the case quickly grew bigger than just a teenage suspect. Investigators were no longer focused only on the young shooter. They began asking a larger question: who actually gained from these crimes? If a 15-year-old was allegedly involved in several targeted killings, many believed there had to be older people connected to the situation. Soon, the investigation reached one of Louisiana's most well-known rap artists, who found himself in court fighting for his freedom. At the same time, the teenager who had confessed was facing a much darker future. When the charges became public, the atmosphere in Baton Rouge changed immediately. This was no longer just a local crime story. A nationally recognized rapper was now part of the case. Media attention exploded. News trucks surrounded the courthouse, cameras followed every move, and online blogs reported updates daily. What started as street violence had turned into a high-profile legal battle. Boosie Badass was accused of being connected to several murders, including the 2009 killing of Terry Boyd. Prosecutors claimed he had arranged violent acts while continuing his music career. They described him as someone living two lives, one as a successful artist and another connected to street conflicts. The consequences were serious. If he had been found guilty, he could have faced the death penalty. The prosecution relied heavily on witness statements and the confession given by the teenager, Marlo Mike. They argued that there was a clear pattern, a motive, and coordination behind the crimes. According to their case, the young shooter was not acting alone. However, the defense strongly challenged these claims. Lawyers questioned the reliability of witnesses and pointed out contradictions in the testimony. They also argued that there was no physical evidence directly proving that the rapper ordered any killings. There were no recorded instructions and no confirmed financial trail. In a criminal trial, this matters greatly. If the jury has reasonable doubt, the law requires them to find the defendant not guilty. After weeks of testimony and heavy media coverage, the verdict came in 2012. Boosie was found not guilty and released. His supporters celebrated outside the courthouse, while critics questioned the outcome. For years afterward, people in Baton Rouge debated the case. Some believed justice had been served. Others felt the result showed how strong legal teams and financial resources can influence a trial. Meanwhile, the teenager at the center of the case was dealing with a completely different reality. While one man returned to his career and public life, the other was preparing to spend the rest of his life in prison. Michael Louding had just turned 16 when he was sentenced to life without parole. That meant no chance for early release, no review later in life, and no opportunity to prove he had changed. He was sent to the Louisiana State Penitentiary, also known as Angola, one of the largest and most secure prisons in the country. He entered that environment as a teenager. At the time, Louisiana was known for being very strict with juvenile sentencing. Across the United States, more than 2,000 people were serving life sentences without parole for crimes committed as minors. The idea behind these punishments was that some crimes were so serious that age should not matter. However, scientific research was beginning to challenge that belief. Brain experts had already shown that the part of the brain responsible for judgment, impulse control, and long-term thinking does not fully develop until a person's mid-20s. This means teenagers often do not fully understand the consequences of their actions. Despite this research, the court focused on the severity of the crimes. With 9 killings connected to one teenager, the judge ruled that the harshest punishment was justified. The decision sparked debate across the country. Some people believed justice was necessary for such serious violence. Others argued that a child had been given a punishment that left no room for rehabilitation or change. Only months after his sentence, the national conversation shifted. In 2012, the U.S. South Supreme Court ruled in Miller v. Alabama that automatic life sentences without parole for juveniles were unconstitutional. Judges, the court said, must consider a young person's age, background, and potential for growth before giving such a severe punishment. Then, in 2016, another decision made that ruling apply to past cases. Many inmates who had been sentenced as minors were given a chance to seek new hearings. Some became eligible for parole after serving a certain number of years. However, the process was not simple. Each case had to be reviewed individually, and legal details often determined the outcome. For Michael Louding, the path forward remained uncertain. As legal debates continued, activists and public figures began speaking out. One of the most vocal was Charleston White, who focuses on juvenile justice issues. He argued that the case showed a system that punishes young offenders harshly while older and more powerful people move on with their lives. His comments brought new attention and fresh arguments. Today, the case still raises difficult questions. Should someone who committed serious crimes as a teenager spend their entire life in prison? How much responsibility should fall on a young person growing up in a violent environment? And can someone who made terrible choices at 15 ever truly change? The courts made their decision years ago, but in the public eye, the debate is far from over.